is Bean to Barstool, a podcast that looks at the intersections of craft beer and craft chocolate. My name is David Nilsson. I'm a professional beer writer and an advanced cicerone, and the creator and host of this show. The music for this episode is by my dear friend, indie folk musician Anna P.S. You can find out more about Anna's music in the show notes or at her website, annapsmusic.com. You can find links and information about our guests in the show notes as well. I hope you enjoy this episode of Bean to Barstool. Anna Sear of Ritual Chocolate in Utah came on the show way back in 2021 for our episode about honey. Ritual has been one of my favorite bean to bar makers for years, and I have probably used their après bar in professional beer and chocolate pairings more than any other single bar. A couple months back, Ritual sent out an email about a former employee who had recently won a national cocktail competition using a recipe for one round of the contest that had cacao and chocolate from Ritual, and I knew I needed to learn more. Michael George is a bartender and mixologist in Salt Lake City. They split their time between a couple different bars. You can find them on various nights at Water Witch, a James Beard-nominated bar, and Acme Bar Co. They bring a passion for flavor and story, their own vibrant personality, and the sensibility of their background in the kitchen to their drinks, in which they seek to both honor tradition and break through artificial barriers of what a drink can be. As a Black, queer, non-binary person, the barriers Michael is working to break down go far beyond just the strictures of what can go into a cocktail to encompass who gets to make that cocktail in the first place. Michael recently won the prestigious Black Manhattan contest with two cocktails that tell amazing stories and push the boundaries of flavor. One of those drinks, which they named the Blackest in the Forest, was made using cacao and chocolate from Ritual Chocolate and tells the story of Michael's roots, where they've been, where they are now, and where they're going. Michael, of course, tells the tale of this accomplishment far better than I can, so let's get right into our conversation. I know you're going to fall in love with Michael's infectious enthusiasm and expansive knowledge like I did. At the outset, I asked them how they got started in food and beverage.
My first love has always been writing. I was quite the writer when I was a kid, always coming up with like short stories and stuff like that my teachers would love to show to like my parents and stuff like that, and like, this kid's going to be an author one day. And it's through writing that I got into food. Actually, I entered an essay contest when I was in the 5th grade, so like I was 10 years old, and I have no idea what the essay topic was, what it was for, nothing like that. I just genuinely can't remember. But what I do remember is that I won that essay contest. And I remember it because the prize for the contest was that the winner got to work alongside one of Oprah's personal chefs for 10 weeks at this place, this creative art space in downtown Chicago called Gallery 37, which I'm not sure is even there anymore. But so I got into cooking through writing, and I got to work alongside one of Oprah's personal chefs with a group of about 19 other kids from all over the city of Chicago. And so I grew up on the west side of Chicago. So it was quite the trek to get downtown, probably about 20 or 30 minutes or so. And so I did that program, I want to say like 3 times a week for 10 weeks. And it just really pushed me into this avenue of food. It was like after the first day, I was like, I don't want to be a writer anymore. I want to be a chef. Yeah, that's what I pursued like right after. So that's how I got into cooking, kept up with it like forever after that moment, made sure that I was in like home ec when I got into high school and stuff like that. And it was around 16 that I got in pastry specifically. So I was just like making box cake mixes and like box brownie mixes and cookies and stuff like that, like for friends and family for their birthdays. And I just kind of fell in love with that and started making things from scratch. And when it came to applying for colleges, I applied to 2 colleges, 2 culinary schools. I got into both, and I just picked the one that I wanted to go to, which was Le Cordon Bleu in Chicago. And yeah, I pursued my career in pastry like straight from high school, and like I've been stuck here ever since.
That's fantastic. That's an amazing story about winning the essay contest. That's great.
Yeah, it was cool. Like I'm, growing up in like, the Chicago public school system, it's 100% underfunded, especially in marginalized communities of Latinx people and Black people. So our communities were extremely underfunded, but like it was super dope that, and I'm super grateful that the school that I went to, offered, extracurricular programs because like not every school had stuff like that going on. So I'm very, very fortunate for that.
That's awesome. So you recently participated in and won the Black Manhattan Project, which we're going to talk more about throughout this
Yeah.
episode. Tell us a little bit at the outset what the Black Manhattan Project is and how you got involved with that.
So there is this group called the Black Bourbon Society, and their mission is to bridge the gap and address the biases within the beverage drinking community, specifically geared toward creating spaces for Black and Brown people who are beverage enthusiasts, professionals, and experts to have space to talk. They cater toward making Black and Brown people feel included in the conversation of beverage and hospitality. Growing up in this industry, there isn't a lot of representation for Black and Brown people. So as we have always done, we go off and build the spaces we desire. And that's what Brown and Balance has done, kind of like a for us, by us type of mentality. And it's grown into this nationally recognized group of beverage enthusiasts that host amazing seminars, that host incredible tastings and parties and events all throughout America. And they just bring together so many Black and Brown beverage enthusiasts that have an affliction for bourbon. And so I didn't know anything about the Black Bourbon Society or the Black Manhattan Project when the competition came around. The way that it works is that for the Black Manhattan Project, you are nominated by whoever. Anyone can nominate you. You can even nominate yourself. I have this regular at a bar that I used to work at, and I'm at this new bar now and I love it. It's the perfect fit. And this regular just like reached out to me via Instagram and like sent me the contest information. And he was just like, I nominated you, just so you know. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. And then I did some digging, and I found out like who the Black Bourbon Society was, and I was like, wow, that's really cool. And then I read more into the Black Manhattan Project, and I was like, huh, that's also pretty darn cool. Like a competition, just for Black bartenders to like, flex their creativity. I'm like, that's beautiful. And this is the avenue that I'm stepping into in my career is community building a bit and trying to like collaborate and build up and, further support and be somewhat of like an inspiration to the community of Black bartenders that don't necessarily have all the resources or feel like how I used to feel in terms of like walking into these rooms and being the only person that looked like me and facing imposter syndrome and stuff like that. This competition felt like an opportunity for me to answer all of those feelings, and kind of just like flex what I've been throughout the years of stepping into beverage and hospitality, because it hasn't been easy. Predominantly most of my work in the industry comes from Utah and Alaska, to very predominantly white spaces where oftentimes I am the only person of color in the room. And so finding this competition for me was just like, all right, this is a really dope moment. Like, let's do this. I was nominated by that regular of mine, and then I also submitted my own entry as well. But after applications close, they select the top 10, and then the top 10, that's when the competition actually begins. So I found out that I was selected for top 10 on a Wednesday at like 6 o'clock, and the deadline for my first round entry was Friday at 3 p.m. And I was
Oh,
like, holy
wow.
shit. I was just like, I have nothing prepared, so I definitely have like, recipes that I have like stored like in my brain, like a bunch of classics and stuff like that. And I definitely have like a bunch of like my own cocktails that I've done over the years, and was like, yeah, hold on to this, and this is a good one, like different menus that I've done, and I'm like, yeah, I would love to revamp this one day. But with this competition, like I wanted to like really push myself, dig deep, think outside of the box, do things I've never done before, work with ingredients I've never worked with before. Like the whole process for me was just like let's be brand new about this. And so the contest rules are pretty simple. It's the Black Manhattan Project. There is the Manhattan, a very classic cocktail that most people are familiar with. You have your rye whiskey, you have your sweet vermouth, and you have your bitters. Stir it down, serve it on the rocks, serve it up. Really classic cocktail. That cocktail, as all or most classic cocktails do, have a host of variations, a lot of different cocktails that stem from them. And one of those cocktails is the Black Manhattan, in which you still use your rye, but instead of utilizing vermouth, you replace the vermouth with an amaro, which is a bitter digestif. And then you also still have your bitters, and then, served down, served up or on the rocks. With this particular competition, it was sponsored by two different brands. There's Michter's Bourbon, or Michter's. They make a bourbon and they make a rye. And then there is Branca brand, who they make one of their more popular products would probably be Fernet Branca, kind of like bartender's water at this point. Every bartender I know loves Fernet Branca, but I'm from Chicago, so we shoot a lot of Malort. And if you've never had Malort,
Nice.
I highly recommend you get into it. Everybody out there that's listening. But so with the contest being sponsored by Michter's and Branca brand, we had to utilize their product specifically. So on the Michter side, we had access to their bourbon and their rye. And then on the Branca side, we had access to their Punta Mes vermouth. We could have used their Fernet Branca, their Creme de Menthe, anything in the Branca brand portfolio specifically. The next day, I just started like digging into my resources. Like, we carry Michter's at the bar, right? Like, can I borrow, like, can I come in and work with it? You know what I mean? Like, hey, who has Punta Mes on hand? I'm seeing that like the closest store that has Punta Mes and like is like, in freaking Nevada, near that casino or whatever. I'm like, I'll drive there and go get it, right now, because I was looking on the DABS website and just like seeing what of these products was available, doing my research on like the breakdowns of all these products, because like I was familiar with Fernet Branca and Fernet Creme de Menthe. I did not realize that Branca brand also made like a vermouth as well as other things. And then I have had Michter's several times before. I've done just like very classic drinks with them, old fashions and Manhattans, but I had never like really pushed myself to be creative with it. Like prior to that, even like feeling like doing all that reaching out and stuff like that, I sat down with myself and I was like, all right, you have like a day and a half to come up with a concept, to build your recipes, to dial them out, make sure they're great, tell a story, and then photograph it and submit it. Like a day and a half. Like, all right, cool. Like, what are we doing? And like before, I dove into that, I kind of just wrote down like what are my goals? Like, what do I want to accomplish with this? And the very first thing that I wrote down was like to win. like, like bottom line, let's just like get this in our head. Let's just like get that mentality there. Like we're in this to win. For my entire life, have never been a competitive person. Like I auditioned for a Food Network show back in the day, didn't get on. I was like, screw that. Like I don't like that. Like I auditioned for America's Next Top Model, didn't make that either. I was like, all right, screw that. So after all of that, like I was just like, yeah, competition is not really my thing. And so like this is like the first cocktail competition that I've ever entered in my life. So that's kind of like the process of everything for me. So it's like I wrote down my goals. I wrote down like whatever I'm like creating a dessert or whatever I'm creating a drink. I always just start like I have this one book, this book that I've been carrying around for years, and it has so many secrets and parts of myself in it, so many recipes and ideations and that sort of thing. So this is like kind of like my drawing board. So I started just by like writing down like flavor ideas, and like it's the Black Manhattan Project. So like I really emphasized on like flavors that utilize the word black forest, a very classic French dessert consisting of, chocolate cake, cream, and cherry. Black sesame, black walnut. Those are like some like the base flavors that I started with, and from there, just like highlighting those names, I started branching out and like thinking of like sub flavors and different things and stuff like that, things that would pair and whatnot. And once I had a good basis of flavors, I was like, all right, cool. What is our inspiration? Like what is this drink about? And I was like, I'm not sure what the drink is yet, but the inspiration is to craft a cocktail that encompasses who I am as a creative and something that hits on elevated flavors, garnishes, and presentation. So I was like, cool. So you in a nutshell, but like times 10. Got it.
No
and
pressure or anything.
Yeah, and that's where it started, and it just kind of blew up from there. I kept bouncing back between like the flavors and like the sub flavors that I had figured out, and I came back to the Black Forest dessert, and I was like, okay, like lean into that a bit more. Like black, I'm black, obviously, and then like I just focused on the word forest, and I was like, huh, like you live in Utah, the winters are right there. You love hiking. You have background in Alaska where you literally been immersed in like the freaking wilderness. And then I just kept thinking of that, like, okay, black and forest and like building off of that. And so I was like, all right, cool. Like black forest, like that's our inspiration right here. That's how we're doing this. And I was like, all right, cool. A black forest, like I know all those ingredients now. How can we expand on them? And that's where things really got fun, and that's where things really got challenging as well too. Because I'm just like, this is a contest. In Utah, we have very specific liquor laws. Like we can't do batches, we can't do infusions. I'm like, this is a contest that is not based out of Utah. It's like I'm like, it's up from here. You know what I mean? It's like literally anything goes. Like anything goes. And like the basis of the competition was like, okay, like so we're making these drinks, and then like for the top 10, like you are submitting these recipes, and then Black Bourbon Society shares all the recipes, and then like they set up a portal for people to vote, and the people with the most votes made it to the top four.
Hmm.
And so the idea was that you wanted to create a recipe in which people could replicate at home for them to try all their favorite cocktails, or try as many of the cocktails as they could, and like vote on which one they like the most. And I'm a pretty over the top person, so I was just like, I know that not everyone is going to be able to make this cocktail at home, but shout out to the few that will go through what I went through to get it done, because it was not
Yeah,
easy.
that's great. Well, walk us through the winning cocktail then. It was titled The Blackest in the Forest, which has an obvious inspiration from what you were just explaining about the Black Forest dessert. Walk us through the actual cocktail itself and your thinking behind what was involved in that.
We'll be right back.
Hey everyone, Final Gravity Issue 5 is now available in the shop on beantobarstool.com. This fifth issue of our zine telling personal, human-centered stories from the world of beer is full of great articles. Bano Segudu tells the story of the South African beer style Umkombothi, poignantly explaining its role in her culture and the importance in her family's celebrations and milestones. Maria Krugliak writes about discovering the Portuguese half pint after moving to Portugal during the COVID-19 pandemic. Amanda Bruns and Obakeng Malope discuss the water spirit Mamuhaswa and the collaboration beer they brewed in her honor. These and numerous other stories fill the 56 pages of this zine. We've expanded it and added a few features for this issue. It's full color, full of lots of beautiful photography and art. Definitely check this out. It's on beantobarstool.com/shop. You can purchase this issue or subscribe, and you can always support us on Patreon and get extra perks as well. Cheers.
So I have to correct you. The Blackest in the Forest isn't necessarily the winning cocktail. It's the cocktail that got me through to the next rounds. When you make top 10, everybody votes, and then the people with the top four, like with the most votes that are in the top four, they go to the final round. And when that happened, I was just like, oh, okay, like, so do we like just submit the same cocktail and people vote again? They're like, no, we need a brand new cocktail. So then I had I had 2 days, like 2 full days at this point, to come up with another cocktail, like completely different and separate from the one that I already did. But because this is being in Barstool, I will talk about Blackest in the Forest, because
Great.
in a way, it is the winning cocktail. It got me through to the second round, got me to the finish line. So yeah, Blackest in the Forest. The cocktail kind of comprised a lot of different things, a lot of different elements that I wanted to incorporate. As I said, I'm very extra and over the top, and I think that my creativity reflects that in the ways in which I build and layer flavors when it comes to like desserts and drinks and stuff like that sometimes. So I figured out what I wanted to do once I got the basis of like taking inspiration from like the forest itself, as well as the Black Forest dessert. So I knew that I needed to incorporate chocolate. That was just a given. I looked at the ingredients that I wanted to work with, And I just like kind of like fitted it where I thought that it would work best. And that was with the Branca brand Punta Mez Vermouth. So with that, I did a cacao nib infused Punta Mez utilizing Ritual Chocolate's cacao nibs. Ritual Chocolate is a bean to bar chocolate company that started out in Colorado way back in the day, but really like got their roots in Utah and then just like completely expanded. I'm pretty sure you featured Anna on your podcast
Mm-hmm.
some time ago. Well, when Ritual Chocolate moved to Utah, I actually helped open them and I got to work in what is now their cafe because they moved there. They completely expanded their production and moved their chocolate factory out to Heber. But when it was just their smaller size production, like in what is now the cafe in Park City, Utah, that's where I learned how to make chocolate from scratch. And that was back in 2014, I want to say, is when that happened. And at the time, I was fresh out of culinary school, only a year out. And once I graduated from culinary school, I went to Alaska for a summer job. Then after that summer job, I was like, the seasonal life is kind of fun. So then I moved to Utah for a winter job, working in the pastry kitchen up at Deer Valley. And then I was young, so I just got I just got more jobs. Like I was working 3 jobs at a time at one point, like just like, 18 hours a day, like 6 days a week. And it was kind of crazy, but I loved it. But Ritual Chocolate. So I meet Anna and then, I'm working there. I'm learning how to make chocolate from scratch. And like, when I was thinking, when I was getting out of culinary school, I was kind of like our chefs were trying to tell us like, like you can go about this a couple of different ways. You can pick an avenue. Like some of you are going to work with cake, some of you are going to work with chocolate specifically, some of you are going to be well-rounded and like run full programs and stuff like that. And I was just like, I kind of want to be well-rounded. And so like when I saw the opportunity to work at Ritual Chocolate, I was like, I loved my chocolate courses when I was in culinary school. I loved working with chocolate, like learning how to make chocolate from scratch would be great. The funny thing about me though is that I love making sweets, hate eating them. I'm not a sweet person. Every once in a while, I'll have a little bit of ice cream or something like that. Or if a dessert is like super weird and funky and like once in a lifetime experience, I'll definitely try it. But like other than that, like I'm not eating sweets. It's not me. Learning how to make chocolate, it was just such a beautiful experience because I had no idea how similar chocolate was to coffee in terms of harvesting and like production and stuff like that. And so like that was really cool to me. And it was just a really fun process. It was cool to have a machine that tempered chocolate as opposed to doing that, like melting my chocolate and adding more chocolate in to cool it down and putting it back on the boiler, then like adding more, like just like it was really cool to have a machine that you just press 2 buttons and it like tempered the chocolate perfectly.
Yeah,
And
my understanding is that's like the single most frustrating part of the entire process.
like because like it's like tempering chocolate, it's like it's gonna be different like unless you have a very expertly temperature controlled room. Everything around you is going to affect how well that chocolate tempers that's in that room. Everything that's in the air, the temperature that's in the air, like if it's a hotter day versus a colder day, like stuff like that. Like what else are you doing? Like are your ovens going on behind you? Like all these little variables can affect like tempering chocolate. But if you just have a machine, like it just makes it 10 times easier. So that for me was fun because tempering chocolate was not one of my strong suits like back in the day, So and I vividly remember just like using that tempering machine and like filling these molds with chocolate and then tapping the molds to like get rid of any air bubbles and like make it look all pretty and like making the fleur de sel bar and sprinkling fleur de sel on top and making the nib bar and sprinkling cacao nib on top, putting them on this gigantic rack, letting them set, removing them, wrapping them in gold foil, and then sliding them into the tiniest little boxes. And just to see like Rituals, like their marketing now, and to see their wrappers now and the boxes now and the labeling, I'm just like, oh, like it's just so great to see good people win. I'm always a big supporter of the people around me that are just living their dreams like as I'm living mine. It's just like there's room for everybody to live in this life so long as they have the resources and the support. And I'm happy that Ritual had the resources and that Ritual had the support and that Ritual also had the intention to go about sourcing and working within the craft chocolate world responsibly, working within the world, within that world economically, working directly with the producers and the vendors and the people that in which help them, make their brand successful. From the start, they had a very great mindset about that, and it's really beautiful to see that that has continued throughout their success. So shout out to Ritual Chocolate, like really big fans of them. But back to Blackest in the Forest. So yeah, the cacao nib infused Punt Amez vermouth. With the cacao nibs that I chose, with this cocktail, I wanted to support as many local businesses as I could. Just to like kind of like shout out Utah, just because this is where I got my start in bartending. Was out here in Park City, Utah, working at this spot called Sammy's Bistro, which is still one of my favorite restaurants to this day. The cacao nib that I utilize, they just have like just one blend. It's a cacao nib blend from a couple different origins. From there, I used Fino Sherry. So as I spoke to earlier, there are a couple different variations of the Manhattan, another one of them being called the Perfect Manhattan, in which instead of using a full portion of sweet vermouth, you use a split base of sweet vermouth and dry vermouth in addition to your whiskey and your bitters. And I love vermouth and but I love sherries like so much more. Like they're both like very, very different in terms of like the grapes that make them up, but they're also very similar stylistically because I correlate a very nice white dry vermouth to a very like nice crisp dry Fino sherry. And so that's just me. So that was like, okay, like if I'm gonna do a perfect Manhattan, I know that if I did a perfect Manhattan behind the bar right now, I'm reaching for a Fino sherry, not a vermouth. So I went with the Fino sherry. And as I was playing along those themes of the Black Forest dessert and like incorporating elements of forest, I thought of incorporating like an earthiness. So with the Fino sherry, I infused that with dried truffle mushroom and Taiwanese oolong tea. With the cacao nib Punt Amez, I did a room temperature infusion, meaning that I combined the cacao nib, I combined the Punt Amez, I put it in a mason jar, and I just shook it every couple of hours, and I just left it on my counter at room temperature. For the mushroom infused Fino sherry, what I did with that one was I rapid infused it. So I put it in like kind of like an ISI ice cream whipper, and then I added the tea, the sherry, the mushroom, sealed it in an ISI whipper, charged it with 2 charges of NO2, and just shook it and left it in the fridge for 6 hours. And then I strained it off. The cacao nib Punt Amez went for 24 hours. From there, I was like, cool, let's talk, our whiskey. Do you want to go with bourbon or do you want to go with rye? And I was like, I'm gonna go with bourbon solely for the fact that like this is a dessert inspired cocktail. So I do want it to lean a little bit to the sweeter side. Rye gonna be giving you that spice. Bourbon gonna give you a little bit of sweetness from the corn and the mash bill. And so I wanted to lean into that a bit, but I was like, okay, I still wanna play with this. And so I'm blessed to have a Traeger in my backyard. I have so many recipes that involve this hunk of a machine that things that are just I'm just like, you smoke, like people are just, I'm like, you smoke that? I'm like, yeah, I smoked that like on my Traeger, like it's good, right? Like you never had a smoked peanut butter pie, like what are you talking about? And so I was like, okay, cool, like nothing's off the table. I'm utilizing all my resources here. So like I was like, let me go ahead and smoke a portion of this bourbon, just for the fact that like being out in the wilds of Alaska, and McCarthy, which sits right at the edge of Wrangell St. Elias National Park, we would do like a lot of fires and stuff like that, just like out and about and whatnot. So I wanted to incorporate smoke to go along with kind of like that earthy feel. So I put bourbon in a hotel pan, loaded it into my smoker, smoked it at 175 for about an hour, I want to say. And like there's a setting that you can put on there that is a super smoke setting. So it pumps more smoke vapors out and into whatever you're smoking. I was able to get like a super smoky bourbon from that, which was really, really cool. And then from there, just vanilla bitters. And that's all I had theorized. Once I had all of my ingredients, that's when the hard part came, was finding the proper way to balance them. And so the only way to know how to do that is just like legit like trial and error. So I just started like trying variations. I was like, all right, I'll use a full portion of the smoked whiskey, this much vermouth sherry, and and this much bitters. And I was like, initially, I was like, oh no, that's gross. Like it's a complete smoke bomb. You don't taste anything else but the smoke. So I was like, all right, cool. Now I need to incorporate the smoked whiskey with a portion of the regular Michter's bourbon itself as well too. And so I started playing with that, got somewhere, still didn't fit, and it wasn't until the one, two, three, four, five, six, seventh iteration of like playing around with these ingredients, and I was like, all right, that's the one. It was down to how many drops of this cherry and vanilla bark bitters that I want to utilize. I brought in chocolate bitters to reinforce the flavors of the cacao nib. I increased the amount of vermouth just because I knew that I wanted that mushroom and that Taiwanese oolong tea to kind of like really, really be present. I'm like, the smoke is going to be there, the chocolate's going to be there, but I really, really want that earthiness to be there as well too. That's something that like, I don't know, like I personally have never seen earth driven Manhattan before. So like, I don't know. I wanted everything to have its moment. I wanted everything to be harmonious. It's like there's a lot here, but it's like I think that the best drinks to me are the ones that give you something different every time you take a sip. You get this on the nose. All right, cool. I'll take a sip of this. All right, and it tastes like this. And then wow, that's amazing. You come back to that a couple seconds later, a couple minutes later, and it's like now you taste this. Like it opens up and it evolves. And that's what I wanted to do with this drink. And so with that, like now that I had this really beautiful cocktail, I was like, the garnish has to like be something that like matches this. Like, what are we doing? And so I was like, okay, well, it is a dessert cocktail inspired. Let's throw a dessert on top, but like let's not make it obvious. You know what I mean? Like I think that when people think of dessert cocktails, oftentimes we're thinking of something that is overly sweet, heavily creamy, chocolatey even sometimes. And I was like, nah, this is a freaking Manhattan. This is a Manhattan that you could have like with your steak. This is a Manhattan that you could have like with your dessert. Like you could have this Manhattan, and like I was like, the garnish has to be like just as over the top as me. So I looked at like the residual ingredients that I had from straining off the cacao nib and straining off the mushroom and the Taiwanese oolong tea. A Manhattan is classically garnished with the cherry, so that was a no-brainer that would be there, just to reinforce the flavor of cherry and the cherry vanilla bark bitters, but also the flavor of cherry that you find with the cacao nib punamez. And so with the garnish, I pretty much took the cacao nib that I used to infuse into the vermouth, and then I put it back into the oven because it was just soaking in vermouth, so it was wet. So I threw it in the oven at a very low temp to dehydrate it again, and I also did the same with the mushroom and a bit of the Taiwanese oolong tea leaf as well too, which was very like even like the cacao, like with the cacao nib, just like yeah, just throw it in the oven. With this, I had to like pick through it and grab as many pieces of the mushroom as I can and a very select piece of the tea, because if I were to blend it all, I feel like the tea would have overpowered the mushroom and it would have been a bit too bitter and too astringent for what I was looking to do. And so once I had both of those portions of ingredients dried, I took a portion of the dry cacao nib, added in the mushroom and a portion of the tea, and like pulsed it in a Rolo coupe and made kind of like a dirt to resemble like the dirt you would find on a forest floor. And I was like, okay, I can't just throw this dirt on top of the cocktail. Like it can't just like sit in the cocktail. Like that won't make any sense. It won't get the point across. And I was just like, like you could dive deeper with the chocolate. Like you could dive deeper with the chocolate notes. And so I was like, just do a chocolate disc and sit it on top of the glass, like, and like use that as like a platform to like create somewhat of a garden. It was just like all of those things like came, like those ideas like came in succession. It was like a 20-second span of like, you do this, and you do this, and you do this. And I was like, oh my God, that's so cool. Like I've never done that before. So I got some chocolate. I went with Ritual Chocolates Ecuadorian 70%. With this being a Manhattan, I still wanted it to be spirit forward, even though I had all these layers flavors working in there as well too, but it was still whiskey driven at its core as a Manhattan should be. And I was just like, okay, like I wanted to go with a 70% chocolate because I didn't want to play into something being overly sweet. I pick up on the sweetness in a 70% chocolate, but like most people won't. It's going to be a little bit too bitter to them. But I was just like, this is like the perfect thing to pair with this because it's spirit forward. It has these layers of complexity and these undertones that the chocolate is only going to bring more out of. Like where the chocolate is bitter, when you pair it with this drink, it brings out a subtle sweetness. It brings out a subtle creaminess that I was missing because there was no cream involved. And so it's like the going with the Ecuadorian 70%. It had notes of like honey and fudge and graham, and all those things just kind of play back into the fire for me. Like, you know, doing like going being in Alaska and like being sitting around the fire, kind of like a s'mores effect almost. And I was like, that's cool. I like that. And so yeah, I took that chocolate. I didn't temper it. I just like melted it, laid it out or spread it out on parchment and just like kind of let it set. And then I took a cookie cutter that I torched like the bottom of to get it very, very hot.
Mm-hmm.
And I just cut out these circles and I cut different sizes just to figure out which one fit the glass specifically. And then because I wanted it to like sit directly in the glass without it touching the drink. Like I didn't want it to overlap. I wanted to like kind of perfectly sit in the glass. And then from there, I took a smaller cookie cutter and I cut a circle out of it because I didn't want the whole, like you have to be able to drink this somehow, you know what I mean? And so I cut a smaller hole very close to like the edge of the circumference, the edge of the circle, just so like you had enough lip room that like you wouldn't get like a bunch of stuff falling on you, you know what I mean? And from there, I placed that circle on top of the cocktail, and I just kind of like did the dirt on top. And then instead of serving a whole cherry, I sliced the cherries just to kind of like plate them differently. And I was like, oh, reincorporate that flavor of mushroom just in case somebody doesn't pick up on it as strong as you do. And then I just placed like slices of the dried truffle mushroom on there. So it's like the garnish for me, the idea was for the person enjoying the cocktail to be in control. What do you want? If you want something if you want to make this drink a little bit sweeter, you're going to pick up that chocolate, you're going to bite it, and you're going to take a sip. If you want to make this drink a little bit more bitter, you're going to grab a piece of that cacao nib and dry truffle mushroom dirt. And, you know, that's going to bring out some bitter notes for you. If you want to make it, you know, a little bit sweeter, still, you're going to grab that cherry. And if you want, you know, more earth driven, more terroir driven flavors, you're going to pick up a piece of that dry truffle mushroom. So it's like, however you want to go about it, like choose your own adventure essentially. And like, I love that. So yeah, that's Blackest in the Forest in a nutshell.
That sounds amazing. I love the thoughtfulness behind every single step of that. I can tell you there is no way I'm going to have the patience and know-how to recreate that at home. So I hope there are some people out there who are able to.
We'll be right back.
Hey everyone, my book on pairing craft beer and craft chocolate is available now on Amazon and on the Bean to Barstool shop. Pairing Beer and Chocolate, a guide to bringing the flavors of craft beer and craft chocolate together, is out now. This paperback book explains the process of pairing beer and chocolate, includes a guide to hosting a pairing at home, walks through dozens of beer styles to provide style-by-style pairing guidance, and gives room for taking your own pairing notes along the way. This is the only book on pairing beer and chocolate available. Grab your copy now at the link in the show notes or on Amazon. If you manage a tap room, bookstore, chocolate shop, or cafe and want to stock the book, get in touch about our easy wholesale process. Beer and chocolate belong together, and this book is your guide to getting the most out of every pairing.
The funny thing is, like, all of this, like, I okay, unless you have a smoker, then like yeah, I can understand that. But everything that I did, I just like a mason jar, like I have that at home, an ISI whipper. Sure, not everybody has one, but like a lot of people like whipped cream, and like I just utilized the resources that were like literally around me, and it was like everything was on the fly. So it was just like once I had an idea, I was like, Michael, don't do that thing where you're like, well, yeah, but what about this? No, get this idea, stick with it. You can't, you got one shot essentially to like work this out. And like I could have like, you know, relied on like older recipes and stuff like that. Like I have Manhattan variations under my belt, but I was like, nah, like I want to do something cool, something fun. Like I've never done any of this stuff before. So like let's try it out. So yeah.
That's great. You mentioned when you talk about dessert cocktails, people are expecting sweeter flavors. I think when a lot of people think of chocolate in a cocktail, they're thinking of very basic things like a chocolate martini, a mudslide, like something very, very,
Yeah.
basic. Talk a little bit about the use of cacao and chocolate and what the possibilities are there in the mixology world.
Honestly, for me, it's still very new. I know I'm not the only bartender that is out there that is utilizing chocolate and cacao in the spirits world, and in the bartending and beverage world. But what I do know is that for me, that infusions are always a fun way to go. In terms of like getting the flavor of chocolate into a spirit while still maintaining the integrity of the spirit. I think one of the best ways to do that is through sous vide infusion. That way, you can really control it a bit more temperature wise, and then you don't run the risk of kind of like overpowering it or like burning your chocolate even too, because like that I'm sure that's a possibility. I've never sous vide chocolate in a spirit, but in my mind, I feel like it would be very easy to burn the chocolate if you did.
Mm.
So like, so be very careful with that. I think that when we think about chocolate as an ingredient, like you said, like it's included in so many classic cocktails. And I think that like all things that anyone does, there's always room for improvement, there's always room for growth, there's always room for creativity. And it's just like you just gotta think outside of the box. And for me, thinking outside of the box was like really utilizing chocolate as a garnish and as a vessel for other garnishes at that as well too. And I think that in the cocktail world with chocolate and cacao, I think the possibilities are truly endless. Like there is a lot of different brands that make drinking chocolate. Let's start incorporating drinking chocolate into our beverages. Let's do really elevated, like really really elevated hot cocos,
Mm.
with like craft ethically sourced drinking chocolates and stuff like that. I think that would be a really great opportunity. And I think that chocolate production is, and a lot of like it's agricultural. Spirit production is agricultural. There's that crossover right there. I did an event with Ritual Chocolate for the Black Manhattan Project, just kind of as a thank you to the Salt Lake City community for showing up with like the votes and stuff like that. A lot of people were like, "How can I taste these cocktails and stuff like that?" And so like I did a night where I ran, this cocktail plus the other cocktail that was all that I also entered in the competition, and it was beautiful. And I want to continue building this relationship with Ritual Chocolate and utilizing their products because they're local. They're like family to me. You know what I mean? Like Anna is somebody that like I've loved for years. And so I want to continue building this relationship and seeing what the possibilities are. Like it's a cool avenue for me because I love when I get to do bar and pastry at the same time. Those are my favorite jobs. When I was in Alaska, I was blessed to be the assistant bar manager and the executive pastry chef for a lodge. So it was like do my mornings in the kitchen, and I would do my nights behind the bar. And I was able to have crossover and ingredients like, I love doing like a lot of roulettes like behind the bar. I call them stuff in a cup. And so people would just walk up and be like, stuff in a cup, whiskey, citrus forward, no dairy. And I'd be like, all right, cool. Like, and then as I'm reaching for things behind the bar, I'm just like, oh, I have this in the kitchen. Like, yeah, I could use that. Like, yeah, lemon curd on top of this would go crazy. Like, okay, like you want like a white Russian. Awesome. I have this gocha chain creme anglaise in the kitchen. Let me spice that up for you in your coffee. You know what I'm in your white Russian for you. Just like finding that crossover is super dope. And I think that there is a possibility for more of that with chocolate and with cacao specifically, and not only in the ways in which I've done it. Like I know, like, and I say this very humbly, like anytime I think of doing anything, I I just type in just like some buzzwords surrounding what I think of doing. Like, for example, like I'm trying to work out this bubblegum drink, um utilizing bubblegum and other secret ingredients and stuff like that. And every time I think I have a bright idea, I'll type it in, and I'm like, boom, it's already been done. I'm like, all right, like that's great. And I just think that's dope. So like I'm sure if I dove deep and really looked into chocolate and craft bartending, I know that I could find some inspiration and find some people who have been successful in creating some really amazing drinks with it. So I think that, yeah, more of it. Like, why not? Like, like I said, like I don't like sweets, but chocolate isn't always doesn't always lean on the sweeter side. I love my bitter notes. I love my earthy notes. I love my floral notes that you get from chocolate. Like it's so much more than just your dark, your milk, and your white chocolate. And I'm really grateful for your podcast for like, breaking that down for people and bringing people on that can like speak to that, because chocolate is magnificent. I remember watching Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory so many times as a kid and just like being enamored with this shiny glossiness, the river, like the craze of it all. You know what I mean? Like, wow, these people are really going crazy for like chocolate. Like that was always interesting to me.
That's great. It feels like cacao pulp could have a really good place in cocktails as well, with that just that bright like passion fruit tanginess that it has. I feel like that would be really interesting to try. I don't think I have ever seen it in a cocktail, but
I think for
um
something like that, like you would have to like be like a chocolate factory working specifically with the spirits brand, just because of like I don't think I can just like go to my local, Whole Foods or Trader Joe's,
yeah.
get like a cacao pod and get the pulp. But I think that would be really, really cool as well too, because one of the larger conversations in hospitality in general, not just centering the beverage scene, but like all agricultural scenes that are related to the food, beverage, and hospitality industry, is like zero waste. And so it's like finding ways to utilize all parts of our ingredients and that sort of thing so that they're not wasted. So if there's any chocolatiers out there that want to send me some cacao pulp to play with some things at home, like let me know. Like we can really get this going.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. Well, real quickly, you mentioned that this was the cocktail that got you to that final round. You want to quickly share your second cocktail for the round of four?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So yeah, like I said, top 10 submitted this cocktail. Top four, we have to submit a new cocktail. I had 2 full days this time. And I was like, all right, cool. I'm leaning into this idea of storytelling, because Blackest in the Forest, like we've talked about the flavors, but we haven't even begun to talk about the story. Like there's so much there. And so I wanted to continue along this theme of storytelling and duality. And for Blackest in the Forest, like I wanted to showcase like me as a bartender and me as a pastry chef and kind of combine the two, like my two passions, into one glass. And so this cocktail, though it wasn't a sweet cocktail by any means, it still leaned a bit sweeter. And so like I wanted to showcase duality and like do something opposite. I was like, if I just did like, a dessert inspired Manhattan, now I want to do a savory inspired Manhattan. And so for this round, I used the Black Manhattan as my base, like just that inspiration. Like, so a Black Manhattan again is going to be your whiskey and then your Amaro and then just bitters. And so like I broke those three ingredients down completely and came up with something that is so weird and delicious. It's called I So Boom. I So Boom is a very, very typical, popular introductory story statement in the Black community. Whenever about to tell a story, it's just like I So Boom. Like let's get into it, hand claps usually are included in that as well too. This cocktail was inspired by wanting to do something savory, and I was like, all right, cool, where is savory taking me? And like for the life of me, I could not stop thinking about Lunchables. And so I was like, okay, this keeps popping in my head, so just write it down. So I wrote down Lunchables, and as I kept building, Lunchables turned into charcuterie board. And I was like, oh, duality. You used to eat Lunchables as a kid. Lunchables is essentially a charcuterie board for children. Now you eat charcuterie boards as an adult. Are we really about to make a charcuterie board inspired Manhattan drink? And I was like, oh my God, yes. And so that's where that came from. So what I ended up doing was a duck fat washed bourbon. I took Fernet Branca and infused it with Gorgonzola Dolce. And then I took another portion of Fernet Branca and infused that with goat cheese. And then those were my infused ingredients. And then from there, I just played with different variations. And I came out to a drink that was a portion of duck fat whiskey, a portion of rye whiskey, a portion of bourbon, a portion of Gorgonzola Dolce Fernet, and a portion of goat cheese fernet. And it when all those things like and like I it this cocktail was actually difficult to make because like there's a very long clarification process because I was like fat washing with cheese, like you don't want your drink to look cloudy, you don't want it to look curdled, so like I had to strain it like quite a few times. If I had a centrifuge, that would have definitely sped up the process, but I don't. So if anybody wants to send one of those my way as well too, like please let me know. And so I had to strain it through a coffee filter, like all my ingredients through a coffee filter several times to get as crystal clear a product as possible. But the finished product is just this drink that's so savory. It's saline driven. There's texture from the duck fat, and then you have like this creaminess from like cheese and fernet, and like if you've had fernet, you know that it's a very herbaceous and like kind of like spicy like deal. And like I wanted fernet to be present, but I wanted it to be tamed. And I was like, cheese, why not? And so Gorgonzola Dolce being like kind of similar to blue cheese, I knew I wanted some funk in there as well too, but like it's sweeter than blue cheese. And then I wanted the goat cheese in there just to kind of tame that down even more, and then the rye for the spice, the bourbon to soften it, and then everything else is history. For the garnish for that, I saved the duck fat from the infused bourbon. So once I infused the bourbon with the duck fat, threw it in the freezer, strained it off, I had this puck of duck fat. So then I remelted that down and used it to brush phyllo dough with layers of phyllo dough. So I took phyllo dough, brushed butter, sprinkled in a little bit of sugar, and then finished it with pink sea salt on the top layer. And then I used that a cookie cutter again, and I cut even smaller circles. And I made little duck fat Ritz crackers because it's like it's charcuterie. You got to have your crunch. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And duck fat Ritz crackers as my garnish. And I served the drink with an extra portion of that Gorgonzola Dolce drizzled with a little bit of locally sourced honey. And that
That's
was so boom. So that was the winning cocktail.
that is amazing. Well, congratulations. That sounds awesome.
Thank you.
If folks are passing through your area of Utah, where can they come to get a drink created by Michael George?
You can find me at Waterwitch Bar every single Thursday, as well as Acme Bar Co. a couple different times a week.
Awesome. What's next for you? You got any
uh,
projects coming up?
yeah, I have quite a few things on my plate right now. So I just got back from the East Coast. I was out in Jersey for Tiki by the Sea, which is a tiki cocktail convention. And then I was also in New York for Bar Convent Brooklyn, which is a huge international bar convention. It was my first time attending both events, so that was great. I've got Tales of the Cocktails in New Orleans, as well as Camp Run Amok. So I'm just really diving deeper into continuing to immerse myself in education. And then, as well as I'm also stepping into event planning, and I've been putting together some events out here in Utah, planning fun things with friends. On top of that, just continuing to push myself creatively, building myself up, and just sharing my resources and uplifting and supporting other people and their projects and endeavors. Yeah, and that's pretty much a day in the life. Like, like I just want to keep doing what I'm doing. The last 9 months I have focused primarily on bartending, but I'm very eager to step back into the kitchen and continue to grow and flex my creative muscles with my sweet treats and desserts. So
That's great. Well, you've mentioned storytelling over and over again. It obviously played a major role in the creation of both of those cocktails. Even your origin in food and beverage, you mentioned, was from a writing contest.
yeah.
What story, if you could condense it down into a single narrative, what story was Blackest in the Forest telling?
The story there is it's for me like it's quite simple. It's about authenticity. When I think of Blackest in the Forest and how that relates to me, it's like I am this lone person in a forest, and this forest is a forest literally and figuratively because like I'm in Utah, I'm in the mountains, I'm in the forest, I'm in Alaska, I'm in the wilderness, I'm in the forest. But the forest is also navigating spaces in which I am one of one. So Blackest in the Forest speaks to me being the only Black person in the room in a lot of spaces in which I inhabit, and how I've had to navigate that and just kind of push through that, and like the difficulties that arise from that, microaggressions, blatant racism, homophobia, all of these things. And what Blackest in the Forest speaks to for me is just how I've remained authentic to myself in these situations, and how these situations have pushed me deeper into that authenticity. I don't fear walking into any space, not because there's nothing to be afraid of, but it's just like, for me, it's like, why would I be afraid? Like, I'm me. And that's not to say that I'm better than anybody or anything like that. There's no ego attached. It's just love. Like, I love me. I love who I am. I love who I get to be. I love how I love. Every part of myself is wrapped in love, and it's took a very long time coming to get there. It's a work in process every single day. And Blackest in the Forest is me pretty much like wrapping the past versions of myself up in the love that they didn't have in those moments of strife and turmoil and uncomfortability and stuff like that. And just like speaking to where I'm at now, and all the flavors are just reminiscent of different parts of myself and like childhood and the journey of what it's taken to get here, and the complexities and the many ways in which I am accumulation of past versions of myself that all come together to make me who I am now. It's about the ways in which I can be soft and subtle, with the chocolate and the cherry, or the contrast of, very boisterous flavors and my loud and exuberant personality with smoke and mushroom and stuff like that. It's all about harmony and balance. And that's what this cocktail is. And that's who I strive to be as well, too. And so, yeah, I just wanted to lean into all the parts of myself that got me to where I'm at right now, and to honor those with love, and to just take a moment of reflection and just to look back and say, I'm proud of myself. I'm doing the things that the younger parts of me imagined and dreamed of. And, I'm still dreaming. There are still tons of things that I want in this life that I'm getting after, but I'm very proud of where I'm at now, and I wanted to honor that through Blackest in the Forest. So,
well, thank you so much for sharing your story and yourself with us today. This has all been fascinating and really beautiful to hear.
Thank you so much. I'm very happy to have been a part of this, my first podcast. I'm really excited.
Yeah. I really don't know what to say after those final words from Michael. In the modern personal creator landscape of social media, blogs, podcasts, newsletters, what have you, we use a lot of superlatives. This meal was amazing, this person is inspiring, this interview is profound, etc. I don't lie when I praise something like that, but it's inevitable that this repetitive hyperbole will water down the impact of that kind of adulation. I wish I could isolate this interview with Michael, especially those final minutes, remove the fatigue of those superlatives, and say, this is beautiful, this is inspiring. I am so grateful to Michael for sharing their story with us. If you want to learn more about them or follow them online, you can find links in the show notes. You can also find a link to the recipe for the Blackest in the Forest if you want to try to recreate the drink at home. It's a little beyond my ability as a home bartender, so please let me know if you do. I'd love to hear how it goes and see pictures. Thanks so much to all of you for listening today. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Bean to Barstool.